Since ancient times, Buddhism has regarded rebirth as a central premise for understanding life and liberation. Without rebirth, the Buddha's teaching on the law of karma would lose its meaning, and the purpose of practice would disappear. It is precisely because life extends beyond a single existence that Buddhism stresses the moral weight of our actions and the ultimate goal of liberation through practice. The Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths, suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path are all intimately connected with rebirth. The suffering of life is not random, but rooted in ignorance and craving, repeating itself through the endless cycle of birth and death. If we confine our vision to a single lifetime, we cannot fully comprehend the depth of these teachings. If we deny rebirth, the consequences of moral actions become inexplicable. Why are some born into privilege while others into suffering? Why do innocent children die young? Buddhism answers through karma and rebirth, teaching that these are not random accidents, but the unfolding of causal law across lifetimes. Therefore, Buddhist practice is not only to gain peace in this life, but to transcend birth and death, bringing the endless cycle of rebirth to an end. To accept rebirth is like accepting the stars in the night sky. Even if we cannot touch them, we can see their light. Buddhism reminds us to take this light as our guide and to walk the path toward liberation. In ancient India, the concept of rebirth was already deeply embedded in religion and philosophy. The Brahmanical tradition and the Upanishads generally held that human beings possess an eternal, indestructible self, Atman. This self does not perish with death, but continues its journey, taking on new bodies. This cycle is known as samsara. In the Brahmanical and Upanishadic worldview, rebirth was not considered liberation, but rather a burden. Within the cycle of rebirth, beings are subject to the recurring pains of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Thus, the highest aspiration was to merge the individual self, Atman, with the ultimate reality, Brahman, thereby transcending the bondage of existence. This liberation is called moksha. This belief in an eternal self profoundly shaped Indian civilization's understanding of ethics and the meaning of life. It was held that a person's actions determine the conditions of future lives. Thus, religious practice and ritual were not only for immediate merit, but also for ultimate liberation in future existences. Thus, long before the Buddha's appearance, rebirth was already widely accepted as a fundamental truth. Yet the Buddha, while inheriting this cultural background, subjected it to deep reflection and radical reform. He denied the existence of an eternal self and introduced an entirely new perspective, which would transform the very understanding of life and rebirth. After the Buddha's awakening, he did not simply accept the Indian notion of an eternal self. Instead, he introduced a radically different perspective. What we call the self is not a permanent entity, but rather a composite of 5 constantly changing aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. The Buddha explained that our attachment to a self arises because the aggregates collectively create the illusion of subjectivity. Yet each of the 5 aggregates is impermanent, arising and passing away from moment to moment. There is nothing within them that can be called an eternal self. The Buddha illustrated the relation between rebirth and non-self with a vivid metaphor, like a torch passed from one stick to another in the night. The flame continues, yet it is not the same flame leaping over. Rather, it is a process of continuity. In the same way, at death, it is not a soul that transmigrates, but the continuity of conditions and Kamma that gives rise to a new life. Buddhism also uses another analogy to explain the principle of non-self. Imagine a candle burning on a table. The flame you see at 8 o'clock and the flame you see at 9 o'clock may appear the same, yet they are not identical. Every moment the flame consumes old fuel and ignites new material. What appears as continuity is, in reality, constant change. In the same way, human life appears as a continuous identity, from childhood to adulthood, but in truth, body and mind are changing every instant. The self is nothing more than a stream of conditioned continuity, not a permanent entity. Thus, in the Buddhist view, rebirth is not the journey of a self, but the continuation driven by Kamma. Life is more like a river in constant flow, not a fixed stone. This understanding marks the profound divergence between Buddhism and the broader Indian tradition. Two of the most profound themes in the Buddha's teaching are non-self, anatta, and rebirth, samsara. Many wonder, if Buddhism denies a soul or permanent self, who is reborn? Who experiences the fruits of karma? The Buddha did not avoid this question. He revealed that continuity of life arises not from a self, but from the unbroken chain of conditions and karma. The Buddha expressed the mechanism of existence in a simple yet profound formula.
Iti imasmim sati idam hoti, imasuppada idam uppajjati.
When this exists, that comes to be. When this arises, that arises. This means that continuity is not the persistence of a self, but the continuity of conditions. At death, the physical and mental aggregates dissolve, but latent karmic energy and tendencies propel a new formation of life. The Buddha analyzed the self into 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are like 5 streams of flowing water, constantly arising and vanishing, without any permanent core. Because they are impermanent, new combinations can arise. When one set of aggregates dissolves, karmic momentum gives rise to another, and that is rebirth. Non-self does not mean nothingness. It means that nothing exists as a permanent, independent entity, yet on the level of causation, actions and results still operate. The body and mind of today are the fruits of yesterday's causes, and tomorrow's existence is shaped by today's deeds. This causal chain continues, forming the stream of life. Thus, the Buddha's teaching on non-self does not negate rebirth. Rather, it explains its true mechanism. If there were an unchanging self, there would be no birth or death, no change at all. Only because all phenomena are not self and impermanent can there be arising and ceasing, and therefore, both rebirth and liberation become possible. Buddha's teaching, continuity of life, is not viewed as the migration of a single soul, but as a process of conditional succession. Buddhism does not say a person is reborn, but rather that the aggregates or consciousness continue. What carries over from one life to another is not a self, but the momentum of karma and mind. The Buddha once asked, "When one torch lights another, is the flame of the second the same as the first?" The disciple replied, "No." The Buddha said, "Yet without the first, the second would not burn. So it is with life's continuation. The new being is not the same person, yet not entirely different. This is the middle way understanding of continuity without a self. In the Pali Canon, this continuity is called Vijnana Sota, the stream of consciousness. It is not a single entity, but a series of ever-changing mental events. Each moment of consciousness arises and ceases, linked by causality. At death, this stream does not vanish. It continues, propelled by karma, to seek a new foundation. Buddhism rejects the notion of a soul transmigrating, yet affirms the continuity of consciousness. This continuity depends not on a fixed self, but on karmic energy and psychological momentum. It is like a melody flowing from one note to another. The tune continues, but there is no unchanging thing that moves. With profound insight, the Buddha saw beings drifting endlessly through the rounds of rebirth. He taught that the cause of samsara is craving, tanha, and ignorance, avidya. As long as ignorance and craving persist, the stream of consciousness continues seeking new forms of life. Only wisdom, panya, can bring this stream to rest, in the stillness of nibbana. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said,
Anamatagoyam, bhikkhave samsaro. Pubakotina panyayati, avijjan varananam satanam. Tanhasam yojananam, sandavatam samsaratam.
Without discoverable beginning is the cycle of rebirth. Beings wander on, trapped by ignorance and bound by craving. SN 15:1. This verse reminds us that continuity is not the journey of a soul, but the unfolding of conditions, karma, and consciousness. To grasp this is to glimpse the profound wisdom of the Buddha's view on rebirth. In Buddhism, rebirth is not the reappearance of a soul, but the continuity of karma and consciousness. It transcends both the illusion of self and the fear of nothingness. This is the Buddha's middle way. All things arise through causes and cease through causes. To understand this is to glimpse the path to awakening within the cycle of birth and death.